everybody, JC here from Toy News International and MarvelousNews.com. And today I'm throwing together this video because I wanted to share my thoughts on the new Logan movie, the X-Men Logan movie that opened up this past weekend. This is going to be a spoiler review, so if you haven't actually seen it yet, it opened up this past weekend, but if you haven't actually seen it yet, then please don't watch this video until you do, because I'm going to basically tell you everything that happens in it. And I don't really want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen the movie. But I did post a non-spoiler review over at MarvelousNews.com this weekend, and if you read that, or if you follow me on my Facebook page and you followed the discussion I was having about that movie there, then you know that I wasn't terribly fond of this movie. I didn't think it was a very good movie. Now, I know this movie overall has actually had a pretty good buzz about it. I think it had a pretty high rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and even some of you have chimed in and said that you thought the movie was really good. So I'm not here telling you that you're wrong. If you enjoyed the movie, then that's great. But basically, I want to go into more detail as to why I personally did not like the movie. And what it comes down to is I didn't like how they took these characters that we've been following for many, many years on the big screen and how it ended for them is what it comes down to. This story is largely based on the Old Man Logan storyline, which is essentially a one-shot type deal that took place in an alternate type universe. And if that's what this movie's meant to be, I could see how you might have a more positive outtake on it. That's not how it's portrayed, really. They definitely don't establish this as being an alternate timeline. They do make some references to, like, earlier X-Men movies, like the first X-Men movie. They make reference to how Professor Xavier first found Wolverine as a cage fighter, and they reference the fight on the top of the Statue of Liberty, and then we see Logan's dog tags that he got at the beginning of the first Wolverine movie and things like that. So definitely they definitely, if they decide they want to bring these characters back, and here's a big spoiler: at the end of this movie, both Wolverine and Professor Xavier are killed. This has been billed as the final movie for Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and Patrick Stewart as Professor Xavier. So if they change their mind, though, and decide they want to bring these characters back, then I'm sure they can then say, oh, well, this was just an alternate timeline. Because, again, they're not very clear about that, which is one of the things I kind of find annoying. So if you want to look at it as an alternate timeline, then it's not as bad. But again, this is being billed as the final movie for Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. So whether this is supposed to be an alternate timeline or not, I don't find it was a very satisfying way to take out these characters. And the reason why is Professor Xavier has become this old, decrepit man who basically is suffering from some kind of debilitating disease that affects his powers. Basically, he can no longer control his powers unless he's heavily medicated. And apparently what happened was, the X-Men didn't have to worry about being taken out by some evil mutant or the government or anything like that, because Xavier one night woke up and killed everybody in the X-Mansion, is essentially what's established. Or at least like 7 or 8 of the X-Men were killed by this when Xavier loses control of his power. And because of that, Wolverine who's not as affected by this when he loses control. He basically, I guess because of his healing factor, can handle it a little better. So he ends up taking and hides him away in some junkyard in Mexico. And again, they keep him heavily sedated with medication, so half the time he doesn't even know who he is or what he's doing or anything. And they've done that because he's got this disease, which, if you kind of think about it, there was no indication of this disease in Days of Future Past, which it was maybe was an alternate timeline. But if this is a genetic disease that Xavier is going to suffer from, you would think, regardless of the timeline, when he got old, he would suffer from it. But anyway, that's kind of a minor nitpick. But just the fact that they take this character and he kills his own students, and now has become this kind of old, decrepit, sad-looking individual. It's just, again, as a one-shot storyline, as you're picking up as a comic book graphic novel, that might make for an interesting storyline. But if you're looking at it as this is how the character ends, all these years on the big screen, and this is how it ends, I don't like it. I'm not happy with that at all. I think it's a terrible way to do it. It's depressing, and it's just not a fitting way to take out these characters. Wolverine, he's dying. His healing factor's killing him. He's basically a limo driver, and he's washed up. Not a great way to portray this character, to take the character out on the big screen. And so that at the crux is why I did not like this movie. Now, I also didn't really like that this movie didn't really fit in with anything that was previously established. It doesn't really lay any groundwork for any future movies. 20th Century Fox is constantly building up these movies as this big all-encompassing universe for the X-Men, similar to what Marvel Studios has done with the Avengers and everything. But that time and time again, when 20th Century Fox does something that people didn't like or whatever, they just forget about it. We saw it with Deadpool. We saw Deadpool introduced in this universe in the first Wolverine movie. Nobody liked it. It was terrible. I agree, it was horrible. And so we jump forward to the Deadpool movie, and all of that is completely forgotten. They kind of make fun of it, but they don't really explain it, anything along those lines, no real connection. And that's what they do time and time again. We saw the ending scene of the last Wolverine movie, and then really made no sense whatsoever. We saw Mr. Sinister, a teaser for Mr. Sinister at the end of the Apocalypse movie, and absolutely no reference to Sinister in this movie whatsoever. We saw Caliban in this movie, which we also saw in the Apocalypse movie, played by a totally different actor, portrayed in a totally different way, and I actually did some reading about this, and the reason that is because the director of this movie didn't bother to communicate with the director of Apocalypse. So neither one knew what the other was doing. They both needed a mutant hunter, and so they picked the Caliban character, but with totally different takes on how the character is. And so you get this two totally different versions of the character, and that's essentially sums up how this universe is treated. And so I hate it. Every time I watch one of these X-Men movies, it annoys me because it's supposed to be an all-encompassing connecting universe, and we keep hearing things about X-Force and Cable and New Mutants and all this stuff, and it's like, I don't want to see that if they can't do a better job of interconnecting these characters. And I get tired of just like, oh, well, let's just forget that this happened because we didn't like it. I mean, with Days of Future Past, I thought that was kind of a clever way. X-Men 3 was a horrible movie, and so it was kind of a nice way to reset from that. The first two X-Men movies I love. I thought were great movies. I think we wouldn't have all the comic book movies that we have today. We wouldn't have the Marvel Studios and the Avengers and all that. I don't think if we didn't have those first X-Men movies. I think those were great movies. Yes, it would have been great if we had had more comic book accurate costumes in those movies as opposed to the leather outfits. But I still thought those were great movies. But ever since then, it's really kind of been downhill. And every time they do something that they don't like or we don't like, and they decide they don't want to go forward with it, we're just supposed to pretend that it never happened. And that is really what bothers me. And then the fact that, like I said, they take these characters and they make Xavier this sick old man who wiped out pretty much all of his own students. That's how he ends up going out. I don't like that. There were some nice tributes to, or I wouldn't say nice, but there were some Easter eggs and everything to other X-Men movies, but it just really, this is how these characters end, this is how their lives end, this is everything that they've been building up to, and this is how it ends. And I just did not like it. It was depressing, and I did not like it. So, like I said, if you want to look at it as a standalone movie, as a one-shot where it's kind of an alternate universe type thing, then I could see how you might enjoy it better, but that's not really how it was billed. And again, it's definitely been billed as the final movies for Hugh Jackman and Patrick Stewart. So even if they decide to get a new actor to play Wolverine, it still, to me, is just not a great way to take these characters out. So that's why I didn't like it. Apparently there was a teaser for Deadpool 2 at the beginning, I guess shown as a trailer. It wasn't actually shown in my movie. I didn't get to see it at the beginning of my movie, but it is online. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a link below. I don't want to include it in this video because I'll get dinged for copyright, but basically it kind of makes fun of Superman, and we see Deadpool, and he comes across this robbery that's happening, and so he goes and runs into a phone booth, And somehow they managed to get the music for the Superman from the original Superman movies. I don't know how they pulled that off. You know, how Warner Brothers and such allowed the music for a DC movie to be played in a Marvel 20th Century Fox movie. But it's funny. You know, he goes in the phone booth, he changes, but he takes so long to change, you know, to put his costume on. By the time he gets out and runs over, the guy that was being robbed has been shot and killed, and the robber's long gone. So, and he's like, oh, damn, you're not going to recover from that. So it was definitely kind of funny, but again, it wasn't shown on my when I saw the movie, but it again is online. But that's really the only kind of reference to anything that this movie makes as far as like building upon for future X-Mutant movies was that trailer. So. No, unfortunately, we never got to see Wolverine in that yellow and brown costume that was teased that we were supposed to see in the last Wolverine movie, but never did. They do, you know, Wolverine in this movie, they pull out some Marvel comics, which, again, I thought was kind of lame. But not really connected to anything that's been previously established. It's just like they wanted to pull out these comic books, which were actually apparently drawn by Joe Quesada. But that was really it. As far as ever seeing Wolverine and Hugh Jackman in an actual Wolverine costume, that's probably as close as we're ever going to get to it, unfortunately. You know, basically what it comes down to is I wish 20th Century Fox would work out a similar deal like Sony did with Spider-Man and allow these characters to be portrayed in the regular Marvel Universe, allow Marvel Entertainment to help them establish a real universe that is really connected and not this thrown together, everybody does their own thing, and then we're supposed to pretend it's all part of the same universe, even though it doesn't make sense. I think both Marvel and 20th Century Fox would benefit from a deal like Marvel and Sony did, and I really wish that would happen. Unfortunately, I don't think it ever is, at least not in time to get to see characters like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine alongside the other Avengers and stuff like that. So that's why I didn't like the movie, though. It wasn't really about the story itself, though. Again, I did think the story dragged a little bit in parts. There were definitely a couple times when I was sitting in my seat in the theater and going, okay, when is the climax coming? Okay, are we getting to the ending? So I did think the story maybe dragged a little bit, but that wasn't my main problem with the movie, and it wasn't certainly not the acting. It was basically how they took these characters and how the depressing ending for them, and that this isn't a one-shot alternate timeline type deal. This is essentially how these characters that we've seen on the screen since day one ended up, how their lives ended. And it was very depressing, and yeah, you might say, well, maybe that's more accurate or more realistic than some kind of happy superhero comic book ending. But, when I go to a comic book movie, believe it or not, about X-Men and Marvel characters and stuff, believe it or not, I'm looking for a comic book movie. That's what I kind of want to see, and especially when you're ending these long established iconic characters with this movie. I kind of expect something a little bit better. So that's why I didn't like it. Definitely would love to hear your thoughts if you've seen the movie, why you agree with, if you agree with me, why, if you disagree with me, why. And again, this isn't me trying to tell you that you're wrong if you like the movie. I respect the fact that if you did like it, and I can even kind of understand it to a certain point of view, but hopefully you can understand why I didn't like the movie, even if you did. So definitely let me know in the comments section below what you thought. And until next time, guys, I will catch you later.